Mom, I don't know what it is. Every single night I have woken up sweating because I need to world build the werewolf smut universe.
Son, ever since you were born, I knew that you were going to save the world, one beta at a time.
Why, hello there, dear viewer. I didn't see you there. I'm so happy you've returned. That was a funny joke. You cannot leave the premises due to the physical incapacitation of being chained to my radiator. But my sentiment is true, dear viewer, and so is the syllabus.
Remember this thing? Check it out. As you can see, today we will be tackling some of the central questions of our world.
As stated last time, my name is Z. I'll be your professor here today, and welcome back to BETAOLOGY. Jesus may be the Alpha and the Omega, but today, my darlings, we are all beta gods. Here is my Omegaverse.
I'm God now. This is my Omegaverse? Kinda. In our last lesson, which, if you haven't watched that, why are you here? We reviewed the history of Omegaverse, established the most common tropes, and found that none of them consider betas like goddamn at all. In fact, the existence of betas causes multiple gaps in logic in our fake wolf smut, something I cannot abide. Thus, it is our job today to build a role for betas within the most common cultural setup of Omegaverse, alphaarchy.
This does mean our world is going to be a little bit fucked up. That wasn't my choice. I'm dealing with what the people have given me. Speaking of which, there's multiple ways to do even all this, okay? I'm going to need you to look at your course schedule.
You are currently enrolled in an intermediate course, BETAOLOGY 101, where I look at the implications of what people have already written and carve a space for betas within that. Do you want something more intrusive than that? Cool, me too. Our next course will be Advanced, where my dear friend Erin and I will share custody of you as we build out the betaverse and rewrite the institution of marriage to be a 3-person union between all secondary genders.
I will be borrowing from her ideas today because that woman is a genius, but I have some very specific guidelines I have given myself. Thus, my method is as such. Number 1, I will identify already established Omegaverse tropes. Number 2, find reason for them grounded in cold hard science. And number 3, build a world through the following implications. If I cannot find any facts or cold hard logic,
So grab your notebooks, my students. Let us begin.
I believe it was William Shakespeare who said, "Friends, Romans, cutty men, lend me your queers. I come to bury alphas, not to praise them. The evil that men do live after them, the good is often tarred with their bones, so let it be with alphas."
Testament number 2, we are in alphaarchy, which means we have real specific gender roles. Our known classical gender roles are as follows. The ideal alpha is meant to be a provider and embody hypercompetence and dominance. The ideal omega is to be provided for, nurturing, submissive, meh. Where the hell are my fellow beta bitches at?
That's why we're here today. We're going to have several mental breakdowns that hopefully lead us to figuring out what is viewed as the ideal beta under this paradigm. What does the society think that looks like? What are the false promises of happiness for performing your role well?
Diminishing smut tropes is not my job nor my passion, and so my first point of entry is this: office sex.
Dear viewer, allow me to introduce you to a trope so ran through it may as well be an Omega on AO3. Readers of Omegaverse are already familiar with the classic setup. An Omega is at work when suddenly a surprise heat is triggered. Maybe they hit second puberty late or didn't take their heat suppressants, who is to say? Regardless, now they must run off to their home, typically with an alpha, coworker, or boss, or intern trailing after them to consummate the relationship and have delirious, unprotected intercourse as HR hangs their head. This scenario occurs frequently enough that it begs the question, how many yearly government-mandated sex days off from work do alphas and omegas get? There has to be legislation about this. I am not saying good or fair legislation, but it affects alphas and alphaarchy. There's probably at least a minimum number of required days off, and given that mandated number is not enough, days people would be forced to take off anyway. Additionally, this is like horny dominoes. An omega going into heat could trigger several ruts or vice versa. It is, therefore, likely not an uncommon phenomenon for an office to empty out, leaving only the betas to finish the work. Betas have no biological need for fuck leave. There would be no protective legislation there. I mean, I live in America, and we barely have protections for things that are biological needs. This means betas are essentially an exploited labor class, constantly expected to work overtime to fill in for missing labor.
This begs the question, Are there beta unions? Beta court cases for fair workplace practices? Beta strikes? Do they get paternity leave to go hang out with their pack when someone is pregnant, or is that just an Omega thing? That last one is debatable, but I would have to assume yes to the rest. And thus, they have struggles unique to their gender.
Scholars have posited that this could mean total beta victory of owning the workplace, but we have the conditions of alpha-archy, which means we got glass ceilings at the wazoo. I think we are far closer to beta stereotyped as perma-middle management. In the most classical sense, it's easier for them to climb the ladder than it is for omegas, but a conservative would tell you that major leadership roles should be reserved for alphas, because honestly, how else is that alpha CEO gonna kidnap YN?
We have a better view of the three gender roles as society dictates. From your typical alpha male podcast perspective, it would be alphas belong in the boardroom, omegas belong in the bedroom, betas belong in the unpaid internship position getting me coffee. That's offensive, I know, but I can say that. I'm a beta.
We interrupt your viewing for a mandated beta workplace harassment module. What is wrong with the previous statement? That is correct. Betas can, in fact, still enforce negative stereotypes of other betas. Go hit Z with a car.
If we use this stereotype as our entry point, are betas secretary coded before that became a pink-collar job when it was a far more respected position held by men, or after when it was viewed as a fake job for unmarried women? You may be noticing what these questions are really getting at, what we are truly making a choice between here. We have the conception of a beta as an alpha wolf second in command, there to be enforcers a step above omegas. Then we have the fanfiction baggage of betas existing as the world's first omegas, or existing solely so that the author can have them present late as an omega for drama and sex. Secondary alphas or secondary omegas, elevated omegas even.
When making this distinction, what you're truly doing is deciding whether betas are coded as emasculated cis men or as deputized cis women, backup men or regular women, thus making omegas far more marginalized women in comparison, the confirmed bachelor or the sellout girl boss who punches down, which is not an easy nor a clean-cut choice to make. We'll find our answer as we go, but I want to see how much we can play with this so that we can mix it up into something that is not coded strictly as manhood or womanhood. And I did fully just decide that everyone is intersex, so to figure out betas, we have to take a closer look at everyone else.
Peep the syllabus. We're about to handwave science like we're pulled over on the side of the road with a broken engine and we're telling it to keep on driving past us.
Testaments 3 and 4. All about that anatomy, baby.
Biology is whatever we want it to be in this world. Why would we stop at wolves? There's plenty of other forms of evolution out there that could suit our needs.
I am only a betaologist, not a biologist or zoologist of any sort. We're going off of vibes, as the spirit of a megaverse intended, but mildly researched vibes. If I get to be God, I get to make an unholy chimera of smut, okay? And what is the first joint of that chimera?
My people of the Radiator, I will now speak on the humble clownfish. They are really weird, and Nemo's dad should have transitioned. I am so serious.
This is because clownfish have a unique reproductive strategy called sequential hermaphroditism. This is where every member of a species is born male and either stays male or some transition into being female, called protandry, or where every member is born female, some stay, some become male, called protogeny. Clownfish are protandrous.
And they have this hierarchy based around size. Basically, at the top of that hierarchy is a large dominant female, but sometimes that female will die, and so somebody needs to take its place. The largest male will internally shift its hormone levels and become the large dominant female, with its reproductive system and its neurology changing to match the role in reproduction and the instincts of that female. This change is permanent.
What does this have to do with a megaverse? Well, it enlightens secondary puberty a fair amount because we have decided that everyone is born a beta and transitions from there. But I don't know if there's any other options for... I'm so sorry. We need to talk about bitching.
I did not name this. It's just what it's called.
Bear with me, bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. Listen, I know, I get it. I feel what you feel. But if we focus on what breaks the rules of our universe, we get more insight into how things actually work.
Is one of those little tropes that ain't in our Bible. It's not a staple of ABO, but it is written about enough that it's convenient for me to bring it up now. It is a subtrope of a megaverse wherein an alpha, through a repeated deposit of genetic material, naturally, turns another alpha into an omega. From my research, it is traditionally triggered by an alpha consuming another alpha's bodily fluids, although that seems to have evolved into, if two alphas have penetrative sex a lot, things happen.
This whole thing is deeply hand-wavy. Despite how hard and fast one must go for this process to occur, there are no hard and fast rules about what actually makes it occur. There are, however, a couple of repeating elements that seem to be key. The elements are as such. God, I love lists.
Number 1, the aforementioned large deposits of bodily fluid and a lot of nodding. This seems to do something to hormone balance, maybe. Number 2, a mental shift from having the instincts of an alpha to one of an omega. Bitching typically has a lot of submission interwoven through it. Surprise, I know. The fantasy is, to be frank, dom-topping a dom-top of any primary gender so hard they become a permanent sub-bottom.
You may notice, that's insane. It has a strong, seemingly necessary mental component, but we don't necessarily know if changes of the body are causing changes of the mind, or changes of the mind are causing changes of the body.
Number 3, sometimes a claim bite to the transitioning party is necessary to jumpstart, but more typically finalize the transformation. Number 4, finally, after possibly months to years, a person's whole anatomy shifts on a fundamental level. They have a heat cycle, they have a different, more omegan scent, and they now can carry children. This is permanent. That is incredibly effective hormone replacement therapy. Bitching will be canonical to my Omegaverse because I find it interesting to be able to do sex-based HRT. You can f*** so hard you hit puberty 3. Hell yeah.
Now, dear viewer, when you scroll the interwide webs and find a fanfiction with this tag, you can nod and smile to yourself, knowing that the biology is grounded in science. This exists in nature and therefore can exist in my ABO tulpas. We are straight up clownfishing it, however, and I do mean this. So there's no good way to do this, y'all.
And I do mean none. Nada. How do we make a version of anatomy for the gender essentialist world while respecting trans people and intersex bodies and also ensuring that everyone who's tied to the radiator has a chillin' fun time? We straight up cannot do that.
I am giving us room to splish splash because there is no way to do bespoke genitalia without majorly upsetting someone, and for good reason. I am asking us to stay away from just making fetishized caricatures of trans bodies, but we must also acknowledge that this universe exists as a fetish, so no matter how I play it, I am not getting into heaven. Let's just lay some ground rules on how things function. As I said last time, to make the designation of beta make sense, everyone is born a beta, and all betas are intersex. You can absolutely still have some form of assigned male or female at birth within that. Get creative.
Now, one of our biggest concerns right now, class, a megaverse is inconsistent on whether or not primary sex has anything to do with a role in reproduction. Sometimes it does, sometimes it's just aesthetic, and is only really important for the betas as normies BS, since I am trying to keep the intense social distinctions between secondary genders clear, which means no beta omega cis woman overlap, dealing with the fact that beta women and men are meant to share a gender category despite the fact that basically nothing unites them at all, etc. And because for the interactive portion of this course, I want to let y'all customize some anatomy, which means I gotta deal with a broad scope of options while still making these distinctions clear. I am left with but one choice to avoid Wikipedia graph-induced psychosis. Primary gender can affect some of the aesthetics of anatomy, but not really the functional role in reproduction. Omega men can't get people pregnant, for example. Or maybe it's just rare enough to be statistically negligible. 86 me for that choice if you want, that's fair, but a man must do what a man must do in the name of science.
You may say, Z, it sounds like we're doing this just so you can make a giant chart of all the ways you can be trans in this universe. Well, yes. Yeah.
So let's clown some fish to sort out our logistics. A full lawful clownfish transition can take months to years to shrink their existing reproductive anatomy and develop their underdeveloped female gonadal tissue into functioning ovaries. They already had some tissue there. It still took months. For typical secondary puberty, we don't have that time because you people want me dead. We can do the sensible thing and separate out presentation and secondary puberty. Rather than them being synonyms, you have the initial theatrical symptoms of presentation that confirm in which direction you're going. This can take place in 48 hours, but the more transformative physical effects of puberty 2 take place over a longer window. What does that look like? I'm so glad you asked. The more time you take, the more of a difference there can be in the omega-alpha binary. And this is directly proportional.
You want to give us more time? Cool. Omegas and alphas can look way different. Anyone can end up looking like whatever. I do not care. You want presentation in secondary puberty to both occur in a leap year special of genitalia apotheosis. Everybody's going to end up looking a lot more similar. However, regardless, we still need to retain some tissue so we can bone so hard we hit puberty 3. So even if there are not really outward differences, we are still a little bit dual sex. I think we can confirm that the beta body is handing out fallopian tubes like hotcakes, and they just sort of atrophy or don't fully develop in non-omegas. As for the rest of our anatomy, I have researched the protogynous counterpart to bitching, studding. Whoever named that did not think through the racial implications of that one. I am formally requesting a name change. Also, barely anyone is writing that, so I can't really use it. Our wolf homunculi are protandrous. You can't bone so hard you produce sperm. Maybe you could with surgery. At this point, I don't know.
As long as we follow these basic guidelines and are respectful, go nuts. Go customize your wolf-gendered Tamagotchis, dear viewer. We have our basic rules. Moving on.
With the combo of a pre-downloaded womb and seemingly fluctuating hormones, apps, or those assigned alpha at presentation could have this extremely effective transition. Despite the stigma that is often written around bitching, I imagine this is a process some people seek out. Is this a form of secondary gender-affirming care? I imagine this is the case for some, although it has the insane implications of possibly being chemically bonded, possibly forever, to the person who helped you transition. You gotta have some, and I'm so sorry to say this, downright evil chasers in this universe. Stay safe out there. So I imagine there's also safety practices to ensure you are not chemically bonded. Do some alphas, firm in their wish to remain with their current bodies and alpha identities, have to work out a way to be together without this process occurring? There's gotta be both. A rich in-universe queer history with a lot of different options.
One could say, if they didn't know whose radiator they were tied to, I know we're a rather long ways into this, but this is all neither cheddar nor cheese. Does this mean that every chromosomal combo in the universe has the capacity to become omega-fied if a specific process is followed? And if that process is almost entirely repeated intercourse, humans have fucked, are fucking, and will fuck again. Alpha-alpha and alpha-beta action has happened often throughout history, even if it is not always socially sanctioned. And it often isn't. The ideal pairing under alpha-archy is omega-alpha. If we layer primary gender on top of this, here on your screen is a chart of what is typically considered to be gay. Soak that one in. We're not doing this because of our aforementioned nerfing of primary, but I think we can state pretty firmly that two alphas romantically entwined is rainbow brigade shit. So, do we need to account for a version of all of human history where 2/3 of the population become a different sex on a dime simply because they fell into bed with someone more than once and maybe got a little nibbly? Probably not, because it would mess up Ted Dirtiest Sock's dream of a new world, and I am shackled to that witch in sort of a cosmically entwined curse situation. Don't get me wrong, I do think it's possibly the most acceptable form of secondary gender transitioning, which is fascinating. But it's not something most people in this world are doing or sanctioning depending on the culture of any given time. Why is bitching not an incredibly commonly written trope in fan fiction, and therefore, by our rules, not a common practice in this world?
We've established that for this world to make sense, everyone needs to be a little bit intersex. We've established that people, even within the same assigned secondary sex, can find a way to have children with each other. But we've established that due to writing conventions, this is against social norms and a form of being in-universe queer. What would possibly be a horrible bioessentialist reason for two beings who are reproductively viable to not be seen by society as a natural pairing? Is there anything like that in nature? Oh wow, I am wondering. Watch me wonder.
This, citizens of the chat, leads us to the next joint of our smut chimera, white-throated sparrows.
An inversion of their chromosomes means that the white-throated sparrow are a type of bird with 4 distinct sexes. There are female and male birds with tan or white striped head feathers. Here's a Punnett square on your screen for those not listening to this like a podcast. Yeah, I know what you are. White striped sparrows are flamboyant, aggressive, and promiscuous. They sing really loud and they suck at parenting. The tan little fellas don't get around as much, they don't sing very loud, and they don't have as many kids, but they're the good parents who make sure those kids actually get fed. White-throated sparrows mate male-female, as one might expect, but only with those that have the opposite head feathers as them. That way, the birds fight less, reproduce more, and all the kids get fed. It's evolutionarily advantageous.
There is nothing anatomically stopping 2 male-female birds of the same head feathers from getting together and making chicks. It's all behavioral and encoded into their chromosomes. They have secondary sexes, ABO and the real. If we borrow this and map it onto our bioessentialist Funky Town adventures, it checks out. This implies that we could have a society where many people of the same secondary gender are reproductively compatible. However, due to their instincts, they wouldn't engage with each other in that capacity. However, it is difficult to find a line between this reading as interesting world building that utilizes existing zoology to justify established Omegaverse content. Good job, me. And just straight up going, see, alpha on alpha action is gay and literally unnatural. And then we gotta get me with like a gun.
So walk with me. In my incredibly academic research, I have read many fics where alpha for alpha pairings experience feelings of extreme territorial aggression towards each other, despite their love for one another, leading to them reinterpreting these instincts so that they don't need to do intercourse HRT if that is not desired.
It was simply the way they were taught to interact with other alphas that kept them apart. This could be something, but we need to toe a line here. The bioessentialist instincts are ABO. They are the bedrock of this civilization. If we woke our way too close to the sun and say all of it is socialization, we are ripping out what makes Omegaverse, and therefore pervert nerfing ourselves. So how negotiable are instincts?
On one hand, instincts being very negotiated makes sense for romantic relationships because I imagine that already has to be the case for platonic relationships. Remember, Omegaverse can have a heavy emphasis on either found or blood family as a pack that protects each other. If you and your siblings are alphas, or you and your kids are alphas, or you and your college AU K-pop found family fic are alphas, a coherent pack structure is not going to work unless you can still have instincts around protecting that individual as part of your territory. It cannot solely be a relationship of animosity and power struggle unless your found family sucks ass. So maybe the instincts aren't founded on much more than social. There are certain alphas it is more socially acceptable to feel relaxed around, so the aggression just goes away. It's all toxic masculinity, alpha-inity, girl, I don't know.
But on the other hand, that's the coward's way out. Does this mean that instincts are just how you were raised? How are we meant to be horny under these conditions? Let's revisit one of the stages of bitching. What have we established? When clownfish sex changes, their neurology changes, their behavior changes. They get new instincts. The physical change is tied with the mental change. When a person undergoes this process, their hormones and instincts shift. This gives us a window into what controls instincts in this universe. I'm about to drop some bullshit on you. Conventions of the genre have given me an inch here, and we're gonna take a territory the size of Texas. Before we continue, you have to promise to love me no matter what.
Do you love Z no matter what? Correct! The answer is yes.
Yay! That was legally binding. The vague pseudoscience of bitching and instincts as a whole have some interesting conflations, so let's pick this apart.
How are people riding ruts or heats? A surge of hormones, right? When an alpha or an omega has a surge of, well, it's not estrogen or testosterone, so we'll call them A or O hormones. It intensifies all instincts, making them very difficult to resist. Following through with these instincts makes you feel better. It calms you down. If we simplify the entire field of Omegaverse neurology down to a digestible sentence, hormones do something to the brain to cause or heighten instincts, and your following behavior results in either a burst of calming or distressing neurotransmitters.
A and O hormone, therefore, heavily conditioned
conditioned behavior. They are every stereotype about estrogen and testosterone out there. Depending on how we write primary sexes, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone still do exist. They're just incredibly normal. This way our bodies can still function, and the AO hormones can sci-fi max.
Bitching seems to be included in this framework. It is an event where hormones cause a surge of heightened instincts, but not the ones you might expect. The topping alpha somehow causes the transitioning individual to release different hormones. O hormone instead of A hormone. They are being pound-town coached into new instincts.
This don't make sense. If we have finishing inside be a hormone injection, that's the wrong hormone for an omega transition. And so sexy HRT seems to be an opposite case of most heats or ruts. Instead of a release of hormones causing mindset could be causing a release of hormones, mind-body connection, somatic response, enough that a person can have a full heat cycle where they never had one before. This, dear viewer, is really weird. Let us ask a clarifying question. If our clownfish wolf creation is getting in the mindset of a heat, what is that mindset? But, of course, feral breeding-focused subspace.
You freaks know about subspace, or hey, maybe you don't, but if you've read about an omega in heat, you may actually get the gist. There's unfortunately not many true studies on it that I can find. JSTOR has failed me. It seems like it's more of a colloquially discussed phenomenon than a specific scientific term. Boo, if you know more, correct me.
But subspace is the name for the naturally induced chemical high one can achieve through being the submissive in a BDSM scene. And it is a high you're advised not to drive if you have recently experienced this phenomenon. There's often a hard drop afterwards, known as subdrop, a sort of hangover exacerbated by shame. This is one of the reasons why aftercare and snacks are important. I'm not your parent, I'm just a concerned citizen.
Subspace is often generalized as a state of massive endorphin release, though that in of itself is very vague. I can't bring you many hard facts about this. I know, throw hammers at me, I deserve it, but I can tell you that being guided into a certain submissive mental state is proven to trigger an intense state of relaxation, floatiness, and inhibited pain response similar to a drug. Though it is spoken of and researched less, there is also Dom space or Dom drop, which operates as an equivalent, but for, surprise, a headspace of dominance. The way that people write BDSM is obviously affected by this, and naturally that's made its way into Omegaverse. Heats are typically written as omega hormones that result in subspace or Dom space for ruts, but just, more animalistic.
Which means if we follow the implications of what people are already writing to their natural conclusions, O hormone is the sub-bottom chemical. A hormone is the dom-top chemical. What are we noticing here? What is the problem? The thing that grosses some people out so much they cannot handle Omegaverse at all. Submission and being penetrated are not the same thing by a long shot, and neither of those things is the same as gender. To say that they are is some conservative nonsense, but they are the same in Omegaverse. Not for the purposes of arguing any genuine belief in bioessentialism on the part of the author, usually, but typically as escapist catharsis. This is often decried as a fatal flaw of ABO, and any attempts to quote-unquote fix this are based around one question: how do we pick this conflation apart? So what are we gonna do? The answer to that question lies in another question, of course. How do we account for something like fuck-based secondary gender transition with what we have just learned about hormone rules?
Which leads us to the potential ties between bitching and pseudocyasis, otherwise known as phantom pregnancy, wherein it is theorized that a combination of fluctuating hormone levels and a bodily response due to strong belief that you are pregnant cause you to develop physical pregnancy symptoms. And let us recall, one of the biggest differences between clownfishing and this sort of transition is the need for an active participant rather than the absence of another fish.
Perhaps part of bitching is a specific sort of BDSM scene, where you are led to, or inducing yourself if you got game, a mental state of submission wherein you believe you are an omega about to go into heat. You gotta do it Peter Pan style. Omegas!
This is helped along by the other aspects of bitching, but the mental state is key, thus adding to the world building and the kink. You need to almost literally mind f*** someone.
Everyone in a megaverse would, as we do in this world, have a combination of all the sex hormones, just at different levels. But unlike us, like clownfish, perception alone can change the levels. You can think your way into a release of more opposite secondary gender hormones if you do it in a sufficiently horny way that would appease the Omegaverse gods. You just need a partner to perform gender at and power through your innate instincts with. Someone cannot transition if their partner doesn't dom-top them well enough. An alpha, in general, needs to perform being in charge well enough for an omega or beta to have an instinctual response, which makes sense. The alpha gender role is based around hypercompetence. If you suck as a dom, someone won't have a sub-response and allow you to care for them, and vice versa. The bodily liquid exchange and the claim bite of it all make bitching a permanent physical transition, causing someone to actually have a full heat cycle as well as unlock uterus access like it's an avatar from a game you just collected. But the temporary effect is achievable by anyone. Think of it like lower levels of clownfish transition. Any alpha can achieve temporary heat-like symptoms. Any omega can have temporary rut-like symptoms. Anyone essentially can, to borrow the words of my goat Aaron, serve alpha or omega vibes hard enough, whatever we decide that means, and have an actual physical response and trigger a response in their partner. Our hormones are social. Omegaverse gender is inherently relational. Look at me. What if we let Omegaverse be what it is? A messy, hypersexual conflation. Gender is, in many ways, an active kink in this universe, which makes sense. It is a world designed for fetishized gender dynamics. In a non-sexualized sense, if we adjust for my best friend platonic ABO, gender is a performance of hierarchy and vibes. An Omega can absolutely dom-top if they got that dog in them, and have people around them to help properly trigger the hormones.
But we're living in bioessentialist city, baby, and so those assigned Omega at presentation have a naturally high rate of the O hormone typically. This is why a person's first instincts will be towards the power dynamics of their respective gender. You try to dom an alpha, they're likely going to get a little growly until you both manage to work through that, or you just out-dom them. But you can work through it.
However, what we view as being dominant or submissive and who we expect to submit is very socialized into us, and so this is what is negotiated about instincts. You may be able to work through your natural responses because you may identify that way. You may prefer that, but are you taught to, and are you taught that is a possibility? That's how we end up with standard ABO dynamics most of the time. It is biologically based, but culturally reinforced.
This actually gives us a lot of room, even in standard Omega-Alpha relationships, because what being a dom or a sub means to any individual, let alone performing sufficiently in either role to trigger a chemical response in others, is still variable and personal. So we can have aggressive alpha doms with nurturing sub-omegas, or sheepdog-coated night alphas and absolutely feral omegas that want to bite and claw and be chased to the woods, or omega tops or alpha bottoms, whatever you want. The exact headspace just requires a compatible partner. Or if you want to get f***ed up with it, somebody who you've been conditioned into viewing as a compatible partner. You get the gist.
And so we've gone full circle. Gender essentialism is real. Please don't clip that. You know the context. Alpha and omega gender is a sex role or a performance of hierarchy, but because of that, it's even more of a state of mind than it is in this world. You can absolutely be trans or gender non-conforming within that paradigm. You just need to be batshit. Listen, this is the closest we're gonna get. You're still here. You haven't chewed through the handcuffs. You love me no matter what. We can move on. It is finally time. Here is our reward. We needed to get a lay of the land first, but the endless horizons of beta potential are here, like a flat Minecraft world, and baby, we are in creative mode. Welcome, dear ones, to Beta Instincts in Anatomy, where we have a mental breakdown about chromosomes for a few minutes.
Quick intermission so I can get my hair cut. Go eat some pizza or something, I don't know.
Let's go, people. Let's move. We put in the work. Let's make it snappy. We figured out what secondary gender is when alphas and omegas have it. We figured out how to tie that into biology. We stated at the beginning that betas are not going to be strictly analogous to manhood or womanhood. What are we rocking with here?
So our clownfish may have failed us. We have a potential option of betas as clownfish sleeper agents, ready to go in either direction if population distribution or sexy dynamics demand it. If betas are an anatomical halfway point, they haven't hit secondary puberty, wouldn't the processes that turn an alpha into an omega happen with betas if they got with an alpha? And there's not the same instinct problems that you have with two alphas or possibly even two omegas. A beta
and an alpha could probably acceptably be together. And as long as they follow the societal rules about who is meant to dom top, that means you have a new omega now. Depending on the thinking of any given time, society probably finds that pretty damn acceptable. And that means we got so many omegas up in here. I'm gonna be honest, I simply refuse. Why am I making this video essay, dear viewer? Is it simply to rant to a captive audience? Yeah, but it's also to spread my agenda of betas as a meaningful component in world building. They are not just omegas or alphas waiting to happen. They don't shift into what would be honestly considered in universe as a more acceptably straight option for their partner. I can make them horny and or interesting in their own right. It's far more interesting to me if betas are a biological and neurologically meaningful presentation, just not in the way we think.
So what can stop sex-based transitioning from occurring to betas that is based in any sort of sense and answer both reasonable to want and possible to achieve?
If betas are an entire sex that did not go through puberty too, why and what would cause that for a whole sex? First, let's take a page out of the white-throated sparrow's book and look at chromosomes. Clownfish, as a species that experiences sequential hermaphroditism, doesn't have sex chromosomes like that, right? That wouldn't make sense. But the sparrow's secondary sexes that is so fundamental to what we're doing only works because of their inverted, mutated chromosomes. And if we have primary gender be a thing, then we may just have X and Y on top of that. Okay, sure, whatever. Let's think about this.
We don't actually know what causes somebody to present as an alpha or an omega. The fics are not consistent.
Secondary puberty could very well be caused by environmental aspects, right? Population distribution, balancing that out, thus leading to no sex chromosomes for Professor Zizi.
But that implies that betas are one set sex, and it leaves us very little room to splish splash in the primary pool, which I'm trying to give us some space for.
I think maybe we let this be bullshit. X and Y chromosomes are named, fun fact, after the fact that one of those chromosomes looks like an X and the other one comes after the X, so let's just make the alphabet happen. That naming system carries some baggage here because of the aforementioned bullshit. So we can do the obvious stupid thing and throw X and Y out the window and make it A, B, O. Omegas are B-O, alphas are B-A.
And primary gender is a mutation of the chromosomes, right? It's a holdover, like whales still having leg bones or something. I don't know. I understand this is scientifically nothing, but I've committed to this and the only way out is through. From here, I looked at potential causes for delayed or stopped puberty. It's often caused by a growth hormone deficiency, which is how I imagine the society views betas. They're just lacking in the A and the O growth chemicals. They have some, because you do need some hormones to function. They are intersex adults, but it's not enough to develop fully into either other secondary sex, open and shut.
No! Open the door back up. Fun fact, even if you are assigned male at birth, your body has a genetically predetermined breast size. If you take enough estrogen, you will grow breasts comparable to people you are related to. A beta body would know how to be an alpha or an omega if given the right cocktail of the mones. If it's just a lack of a naturally produced chemical, they could clownfish. The literal gender fluid deposit combined with subspace would do something. So the obvious thing to do is to simply steal the chromosomes from betas, right? They only have the B or like an incomplete A or O chromosome, right? That makes sense. Cool. We've just given 1/3 of the population a genetic disorder. We just gave them something like Turner syndrome or gonadal digenesis, wherein a person who is meant to have 2 X chromosomes only has 1 or an incomplete second one. That can cause problems with bone development. That can cause cardiovascular disease, any sort of number of life-altering health conditions, which means that all of our beta homunculi have just been born and they already have heart failure. I don't have the nuance to write that world building. They need the second B chromosome, right? It's BB.
Okay.
Well, it's important to me. We gotta look at the tooth gene. I was recently introduced to the tooth gene. There's probably better examples, but I want to talk about the tooth gene. There's a reason why we as humans don't, continuously regenerate teeth, which is a gene called USG-1. Do you still like me?
You are so fascinating. I need to study you like a deep sea specimen. Yeah, I still like you.
Yippee!
This gene blocks the pathway for bone morphogenic protein. It regulates our bone density, and there have been scientific studies that experiment with turning this gene off and on to see if we can have some bone regeneration, which have shown some potential. There are specific genes that regulate and stop development. Genes we can figure out how to toggle. That's not a lack or a health issue. That's trying to stop us from growing too many bones. We can turn that concept into a hormone and code it into a gene that resides within 2 B chromosomes. Why not? Betas are thought to lack hormones, but they actually have an abundance of a B hormone that omegas and alphas only produce in small quantity. The B hormone has to actively shut down at least most perceived effects of other gendered hormones. This is so grounded I'm hitting bedrock. Don't correct me.
This runs us into our next issue, because with all of that, all we just said, can betas have children?
First line of thinking? Of course. Before our divine intervention, they were meant to be regular people, so betas being able to have kids is a thing in a lot of ABO. Even if they are all intersex, we can make it a spectrum of being intersex, so alpha archy doesn't crumble. Society recognizes that betas can lean either strictly omega or alpha, BOB or BAB chromosomes, and we all pretend like that wouldn't lead to another genetic disorder because we are desperate and we need this. There's like a 40% chance of an alpha having kids with an omega-ish beta, and vice versa.
And I thought this has to be the case, because we are getting rid of the idea of AFABs as a thing that reproductively means anything.
Kind of a win, because it separates out giving birth from being a man, woman, or other. Kind of a huge loss, because this world does see people who give birth as being naturally wired to be submissive. But that's the implication of what's written, and I do hope I have given us ample room to subvert that if we so choose. Which means that, for the most part, alphas need to transition to carry a child.
If betas can't at all, only 1/3 of the world can have children, and that's not counting infertile omegas. We would all die out. This would solve that. Except no. No, it doesn't. What have we just done here? Omega-ish or alpha-ish betas, that's right. We just made AFAB and AMAB light. We've reinvented primary sex as being important to reproduction. And omega-ish beta is just our conception of a cis beta woman, leaning a little more into being intersex, sure, but this would conflate being an alpha and being a man and being an omega and being a woman almost entirely, and then I need to break up new sets of pronouns. Betas would then be split up once more into 2 sexes. It would be very difficult to come up with a reasoning why those 2 groups would share the same gender role or name. It's not inventive. It doesn't explain the difference between an omega-ish beta and an omega in a way that would genuinely rethink culture, and if we travel too far down this path, it could lead us right back to the fuck-ass Wikipedia chart. I refuse! That's not fun! That's boring. I'm bored. Betas are one specific sex, BB chromosomes. Great. So now once more, only 1/3 of humanity can have kids for the most part because of the pre-stated guide rails needed stigma around bitching. Bitching is there as an evolutionary backup for this very problem. But like I said, society don't care. Stigma. Think of the birth rates needed for a proper replacement rate. And I'm God right now, so I kind of have to care about that.
We need to make some concessions, okay? Betas do need to be infertile for everything to work. Maybe omega cis men and alpha cis women can get a little bit with it as long as you, don't make that boring. But mostly,
this is the breeding kink world. Alpha-omega pairings may need to simply be hyper-reproductive. I am so sorry, omegas, unless you're into that, in which case, babe, good for you. So we can make omegas a little bit more common, I suppose, as long as we don't have a super majority, because again, oh god, the implications, we don't have time. In modern times, hey, maybe transitioning is more acceptable, which does lead to historically accurate, trending lower birth rates for modern omegas. Those assigned beta or alpha at presentation can bear children with some form of medical or sexual intervention, a win for everyone.
But then, of course, the historical inbreeding problem.
We can't have that many people that related to each other in one genetic dating pool area.
Sequential hermaphroditism would normally protect from that, but not the way we're doing it. We need to have some leave the nest instincts to diversify the genetic pool. You become an adult, you start yearning to leave home a little more intensely than you would in our world.
These instincts don't immediately trigger at an 18th birthday because that's an arbitrary cultural number. The Omegaverse Western world would likely consider it to be at age 18, but there's a broad range for when these instincts truly kick in. All reproductively viable people develop an instinct in adulthood to go form their own pack. Betas may not have an instinct to move out, simply a preference, so it could be more acceptable for them to live with their parents for longer, and it possibly falls to them to take care of parents in older age.
Done. We did it. But see, there's gaps in reason there. There's gaps in my ability to give a shit. It makes more sense than it did before. Maybe let's look at what our house is made of before we start throwing stones. Those load-bearing walls are looking a little glassy.
This leaves us with the final and only flaw to deal with. Chromosomal testing for fetuses is a thing of modern science. This would erase the idea that in modern era we don't know what secondary gender a person is before pube 2.
I mean, chromosomes were discovered in 1905, and I imagine in a society where you normally have to wait over a decade for the secondary gender of your kid, you want to get that tested earlier, leading to the science developing sooner, leading to the world's worst gender reveal parties. But you know what? You're my little god in training. Your homework is to go back in time and kill Otto Bushley to delay the field. And you know what else? I got nothing else, man. Not one single iota of else. We all have to live like this. I'm not happy about it either.
So look at me. What if betas do present? They do develop instincts. They have their own hormone. It's just more subtle. Their instincts could be viewed like appropriate behavior for betas rather than biological impulse. Imagine going through horrible instinct puberty and no one around you even acknowledges that that is a thing that's happening to you.
We are beginning to get into, at long last, the nitty-gritty of the beta gender role under alphaarchy. And though this is my silly haha video and I am making sweeping generalizations about gender theory that border on the grotesque, we must take a moment to say the never-before-uttered statement, gender roles are not fun.
I know what you're thinking. Where did you dig up that deep-cut Bell Hooks quote? But it's true. Patriarchy bad? Therefore, alphaarchy bad. Gender roles are one of the biggest methods of control and suppression in history, and they survive based on inertia and not being questioned, because they are built on a toppling house of 1 million paradoxes. We are all supposed to let lightly cognitive dissonance finger blast us into wasting our lives chasing a false promise of happiness that requires you to trade self-actualization for making people less uncomfortable.
Understanding this is crucial to building a fake one. Patriarchy, and therefore alphaarchy, is seeped so deeply into the fabric of our world that it presents itself as common sense, and so most, in our world, misogyny, is not expressed out of evil, but out of thoughtlessness. We think we're stating facts, not conditioning, even when what we believe contradicts itself. And so, though this is a silly world we are reconstructing, what about betas does this society accept thoughtlessly? What are the beta paradoxes? Because did I mention that following through on the implications of what people are already writing was going to lead to this world being a little bit fucked up? Yeah, I meant a lot of it. I hope we're all cool with that.
We got one already. Betas are seen as more mature because they aren't bogged down by the senseless instincts of heats or ruts. They are more reasonable and can be trusted, to bring it back to our office sex problem, to be very reliable. And yet, they are seen as missing a key milestone of development, and so they are also seen as less mature. They don't present, they don't have biological kids.
Now, to understand what I have going on, you have to take 6 edibles and enroll yourself in a gender and sexuality studies degree. However, I can tell you that this, what we are describing, is almost similar to the infantilization a person may experience for being asexual or aromantic, not experiencing romantic or physical attraction, or at the very least how we treat people who are not very interested in either romance or sex. If you tell people that you don't get crushes like that or don't feel particularly inclined to bone, they both go, good for you. You must have so much time on your hands, you're so above all that. And in the same breath, they will tell you, but clearly you are a little baby who thinks that cooties are real and you need to grow up and you're missing out. Ask me how I know. Omegas and alphas are considered by us to be mega horny, but that is now the baseline level of sex drive and attraction for this world.
So even if betas are just regular person horny, or if we decide to code them as asexual aromantic, it could be the same sort of simultaneous praise and condescension.
But in this case, it's worked into the role rather than something that you are seen as opting out of. Betas are seemingly shunted from the perfect idea of a happy marriage between alpha and omega, and are both applauded and looked down upon for it. I am grabbing you and shaking you. I hear what you think. Okay, so we just solidified betas as less horny. No, we didn't actually. Making betas less horny makes them more horny. It gives us beta fetishists. That didn't work. Okay. We're gonna speed run some reasons why people in the universe are into betas. Obviously, this is not everything, but these are some key voting blocks of beta enthusiasts with what we got so far. There are
Straight up, the people who want someone completely unaffected to be with them through a heat or a rut. They're into the self-control. They could be into someone caring for them who won't be sucked in. That's reassuring. They could be into the uncaring dom shtick. They could be into open disgust. I'm not a cop. Then there are the ones who, and this is the potential to be much grosser, but it's realistic, so it bears being said, who want to see either how much of the A or the O headspace they can trigger in a beta, or if they can straight up get them to secondary present.
Okay.
Finally, the classic, straight up banging your secretary like there's no tomorrow when the missus ain't home.
That will be load-bearing in part 3 of this course, but right now we must still away. I just wanted to give y'all a little bit of the odd sex stuff before we have to wait like 2 months for me to get done with the rest of the odd sex stuff. If you're a beta and you're into any of this, good for you. If you're not, get behind me. I know I caused this problem, but I'm saving you from it in the beta uprisings, best believe.
Second paradox. They are expected to act in a certain way, but they are not seen as having instincts on the same level as everyone else due to covert presentation. Your instincts are seen as having not really kicked in yet. Any instincts you do have are just baseline humanity, what everyone has before they present. Again, not necessarily the case, just what is viewed to be so. This is doubled down by the fact that we do have the fanfic trope of people presenting late as an omega or an alpha, who were likely socialized into acting like adult betas before that. And so we assume that no presentation has happened for any other betas.
So in a weird way, betas don't have an excuse to act unreasonably like alphas and omegas do. Because you don't have the instincts for flying off the hormone handle, you are almost doubly expected to act like a well-behaved beta. The fact that you are seen as having lower-level instincts means that your behavior, if anything, is kind of more regulated. However, science, despite our best efforts to kill that man, will evolve, and we will learn beta hormone real, and thus, I raise a question for you. This could mean, hear me out here, what if heat and rut suppressants are a relatively new invention that use the beta hormone?
Science knows beta hormone and presentation real. Society is slowly catching up, with some people more traditional than others, and we have synthesized the beta hormone for either prescribed or over-the-counter beta HRT.
It's just that this specific hormone is more akin in perceived effects to a secondary puberty blocker. Beta blockers. Everyone is microdosing beta transitioning. There are other ways to achieve suppression, but this is modern medicine's solution, and it's likely viewed to be safer, it's more standardized. Now, in many fics, being on blockers for too long can lead to infertility. If you are microdosing beta hormones, that actually checks out. Additionally, we have decided that everyone has at least the low level of all the secondary gender hormones to function, so everyone would have the B hormone, which would make sense when we look at heats and ruts in nature. We have to consider the possibility of people beta-ing themselves as a trauma response, or when it's not safe to have a heat or a rut, because that would really debilitate you, right? I mean, if you're in a survival situation, you kind of can't do that. So boom, beta hormone blast. It's another evolutionary backup. This means that taking suppressants could have a trauma association, which boom, another stigma.
So I imagine there are also rises and falls of when suppressants are considered to be acceptable both legally and socially. The invention of suppressants and their mainstream acceptance, whenever that is, sometime last century probably, would cause a big boom of omegas in the workforce being seen as respectable. It solves the office sex problem, which society of course blames omegas for. This is a big win for working omegas and betas. It's what both union groups fought for. Betas and omegas working together is important for both causes. We need to stop the infighting, people. That's not allowed in my turf. So now you can be at work with no nonsense. You can just do the work you were assigned and not anymore. Though betas are probably assigned more work anyway due to the remaining cultural expectation. On the other hand, this may mean that modern corporate culture is a mandated suppressant zone, which could, also be bad depending on how you shake it. This world is kind of a nightmare. At the very least, now everyone is getting sued less, office sex is more regulated. And maybe you don't go home smelling like your boss or coworkers if they're one of those weird companies that take, we're more of a family here at this job really seriously and have everyone scent each other to form a pseudo-pack. I don't know yet, scent glands are later in the syllabus. I digress on it heavy, but you see what I mean. Diving into betas just fills out this world a lot. Now, you may be picking up on some implications of the beta instincts here via our B hormone, so let's try to solidify this into our version of the AO mindfuck. What is our beta headspace?
There isn't really anything called switch space, no matter how hard I try. We've already established that the beta hormone can be triggered as a trauma response in alphas and omegas to act as possibly a pheromone and definitely a cycle suppressant. What if we use that as our headspace entry point? The adrenaline endorphin rush we get from extreme crisis management, the inhibited pain sense and clear sense of mind for the sake of managing a dangerous situation, combined with an almost floaty sense of self. On paper, that has some markers for subspace and dom space, though far more dangerous. If we use the bones from that but manage to reel back the trauma it takes to get there, we can make betas experience a high and a crash from interpersonal or crisis management done in specific settings.
You may think that narrows it down. No, that does so many things. It could make some betas adrenaline junkies or some incredibly anxious. It could make them great at kink contract negotiation, actually. It could make the pit be about a bunch of betas in emergency medicine. It could make them get high off of helping people move.
There's something here, but this is very broad. We need to push it further. This is all pretty vague. And so I'm gonna go take a fucking nap and introduce you to our guest lecturer, my goat Erin, as she walks you through her conception of a beta cycle and why that is important.
Hi, folks. My name is Erin Sunsets. I'll be your co-professor for this part of the seminar. Don't worry. You're still tied to our dear Z's radiator, but that radiator has been moved to the great state of Washington for the duration of this segment. There's a really obvious question at the heart of the beta socioeconomic dynamic, and indeed, the question of a theoretical beta hormonal cycle. Unfortunately, that question requires us to face the great bioessentialist enemy head-on, evolutionary sexology. Ignoring the essentialist connotations thereof, then, what is the purpose of the beta demographic? Evolutionarily, what on earth could possibly be the social and environmental pressures and incentives which lead to the creation of an entire third pseudosex, not just within humans, but possibly within early hominid precursors, or even, as it is in some fanfic for some reason, within all mammals on the planet? What's the evolutionary advantage of a demographic, be it a third of the population, or 2/3, or 8/10, which reproduces at a vastly lower rate than the rest? Or even which is entirely sterile? And indeed, in that latter case, how does the beta gene continue? Well, to put forward my own thoughts on that, while the alphas, betas, and omegas of the manosphere may be pseudoscientific hogwash, there are in fact many species in which we can observe a distinct psychosocial difference between competitively sexual males and socially sexual males, all within the same species, particularly among species of birds. While some males within a species will engage with the expected sexual dominance hierarchies, that be it fighting for the attention of females, strutting their stuff, waggling their horns, puffing their feathers, and so on, others will engage in more subtle courtship rituals, exchanges of favors, gifts, and more, for lack of a less anthropocentric term, feminine social quirks. Now, once again, this is not alpha male propaganda. Indeed, particularly in avian species, birds of the latter persuasion often reproduce more frequently than their sexually domineering showboat counterparts, not less. And, in fact, they often reproduce in quite bisexual manners. But in many other species, these hypersocial animals do indeed reproduce less frequently. And indeed, some don't reproduce at all. So again, we beg the question, why then does this behavior persist? Simply put, because evolution does not work on the scale of individuals. It works on the scale of demographics. If there was a 1 in 10 genotype that emerged by random chance when two more common genotypes combined, and it did not reproduce at all on its own, but did ensure the survival and reproduction of other members of its animal demographic, it would quickly become a mainstay of its species. So is it not possible, then, that betas exist in the Watsonian diegetic sense for the same reason they exist in the Doylean and authorial sense, that being that not everyone, in fiction as in life, can be an alpha or an omega, that the constant Heats and Ruts and Edwards and Jacobs, dominance struggles and litters worth of children for every family unit to take care of and raise would become impossible to sustain for an entire species with the incredibly fine-tuned, high intelligence, high mobility, high fragility evolutionary niche that humans occupy? This is my theory then. Betas exist as a natural demographic balance for the plurality and fecundity of alpha-omega mated pairs. In a world where omegas spend half their time huddled up in blankets experiencing the world's worst dysmenorrhea, and alphas spend half their time trying to kill each other, betas occupy the same helpful niche as those beautiful, bisexual birds. But while we're coming at the magically realist who gives a shit its pornography vibe of the Omegaverse world built from the analytic lens of evolution, let's remember another soft rule of evolutionary science. Random chance, entropy, and mutations will almost always repurpose or vestigialize features rather than destroy them completely. We have scleras, tailbones, and appendices for a reason. And as evidenced by the fact that we as humans do not experience them in real life, evolution would have needed to put a ton of effort into making hormonal cycles as intense and borderline mind-controlling as heats and ruts exist in the real world. And if it's making betas already, it's getting its money's worth out of those investments into those cycles. So bearing in mind their proposed evolutionary role as social mediators, flirts, favor givers, and day-to-day chore doers, while Edward and Jacob are busy alphaing it up in the corner, what might a beta's hormonal cycle look like? I propose that a beta's time of the season looks sort of like a non-sexual middle ground between a rut and a heat. In many fics, a rut compels an alpha to be obsessive and overprotective. A heat compels an omega to be nervous and manic. And what that sounds like to me is an anxiety disorder. I introduce to you, then, the concept of a brood. A hormonal cycle undergone by betas, which causes them to become neurotic obsessives, desperate to tidy and fix. In the wild, that looks like compulsively grooming and cleaning your troop members, storing food more effectively, taking long walks to explore the bounds of group's territory. In modern society, where everything is governed by the moral and economic compulsions of capital, well, if you're a beta experiencing a brood, I hope you had a lot of unfinished paperwork or a messy house, because you're going to need something to do with all that wild, obsessive, nervous energy. What's great is that this entirely optional world-building feature can fit seamlessly into almost any Omegaverse world build. Why are your beta characters busy doing all that plot-important stuff while your Omegas and Alphas are busy having messy on-screen coitus? They're in the middle of their brood. They need to work it out. Give them some space.
Yes! Thank you, Aaron. Okay, now we are cooking. Okay, people, let's synthesize. It's game time, beta cucks. Lock in. So with all this, right, we have betas as fussy, anxious minions who have evolved that way specifically to ensure the survival of their species. We have betas as a parallel to flashy, non-aggressive males. We got the clownfish, we got birds, we got other birds. What are we missing here that can give us more clarity for our specific ramblings here today? That leads us, finally, to the last joint of our smut chimera for testaments 3 and 4, meerkats. And species like meerkats. Meerkats have something called cooperative breeding. Cooperative breeding is the it takes a village mentality. Offsprings are cared for both by parents and additional helpers from the collective. For meerkats, only the main breeding pair of the group is meant to have kids. Sometimes other females will get pregnant, but I believe the lead female will then eat those babies. Wild, right? You're cannibal omegas, folks. The helper's sole purpose in reproduction is to help raise other people's children. So, what is the evolutionary purpose of beings in these communities who are not passing on their genes? Well, the thing is, they are. You're not just taking care of anyone's kids, you're taking care of your sister's kids. If you spend your life protecting your siblings' children, you are ensuring your genes will live on. Meerkat families could work as our blood family pack equivalent. You have the reproductive couples, and then you have the folks there to make sure the community thrives. Betas must facilitate the continuation of their line.
Be calm, my noble filth rider. I know you're concerned. Am I suggesting that your alphas and omegas need to have a sibling move into their den of sin, thus interrupting the marital smut bliss? No. I am, however, suggesting that betas are expected to keep tabs on their blood-related family members. Remember, full-grown alpha-omega instincts say that you must scatter to the wind when you're old enough to get married. Form your own pack elsewhere. And the population rate here suggests that you probably have at least a few siblings. Betas must travel to go see different people in their family when important things happen, mostly emergencies and events concerning children.
Typical sibling support, but with a lot more added weight. And birth parents are never betas, so those kids gotta get a beta role model from somewhere. Now, you may be wondering, Z, why meerkats for Betaology 101? Why this form of cooperative breeding? Well, number one, we follow the implication scientific method. One of the most common beta appearances is when an author needs to fill in a family dynamic, so Yahtzee, baby, we world build via that. But you may also wonder, why do this first? This is Romance World Fail USA. Why not start with beta romance? And that is because, girl, fuck you. Y'all are making betas platonic to make them less interesting. Meerkatting is now the keystone of beta norms. This also means matchmaking is a key historical role of a family beta. That's an extension of the facilitating the lineage evolutionary baggage. They may play a big role in arranging marriages in times and cultures where that is important. If your role in reproduction is making sure other people have kids and their kids are well taken care of, you may have a generalized instinct to push together loved ones, whether family, friends, or neighbors, into good matches. That's right, betas have Fujoshi Himajoshi instincts. We found an evolutionary reason why they are always the wingman.
So, we have evolutionary purpose and reasons why beta existence makes sense. Thank God I have cut 1 million pages of elaboration, but that's okay, that's fine. It'll go somewhere, it's fine. I can elaborate on anything.
Where am I going to end us here today for this lesson? At the end of the day, what do we need to accomplish? What does a gender role accomplish? Control, right? But what does an Omegaverse gender role accomplish? Romanticized control. Even if we are writing Omegaverse as horror, it's still a little different. An alpha is not a blanket aggressor. Their brains are hardwired to protect and provide and be good at it. They will be put in the frontal lobe wood chipper if they don't. There's no weaponized incompetence here. The book-taught girlies would not swoon if that was not the case. An Omegaverse role, like any gender role, needs to have false promises to cover up some nasty realities, but it also needs to be kind of fun, like fictionally. You may notice a good chunk of what we have just walked through with betas is not very fun. Testaments 3 through 4 gave us betas as exploited laborers who are middle of the pack, sterile, excluded, anxious, viewed at the very least as the lesser option for marriage, and they need to haul ass across the country to babysit. Under those rules, they really do seem like drab little nobodies. I mean, we've basically confirmed their instincts already, but let's just lay them all out and really root under the hood of that car. If a beta is concerned with facilitating the family line and safety, then pack is safety, packeting along is safety. Say it with me, they got Care Bear instincts. Friendship is magic, brain wiring, soothing mediation, along with a hyperfixation on getting things done. The sexless middle ground between a dom and a sub is obviously a goddamn negotiator. They facilitate proper dynamics. Middle manage on an emotional level too. That's their instinct. In danger or stress, alphas are fight, omegas are flight, betas are kind of fun. They're the best friend character for a reason. That could be sweet until you think about it for more than 3 seconds. What are we taught is safe? Status quo. Safety is normalcy. Normalcy is decided by alpha-archy, the fuckers. A beta's natural inclination to want peace is weaponized and twisted, just like an alpha's desire to protect is. If you play that straight, that is psychological horror because of the implication. Are you ready to take secondary gender roles way too seriously with me? A beta is concerned with the logistics. A beta is concerned with peace. A beta is concerned with things running good and looking good. The reputation of the pack, the household, the company. These guys aren't just complaining to HR, they are the HR department. I hope we all know that HR exists to protect the company, not you. What do Care Bear secretary instincts look like when they are shaped into being very concerned with the optics? You don't want the neighbors or competitors looking over and seeing that your alphas are distracted and weak and your omegas are vulnerable. That's not safe. Those couples fighting is bad for the brand. And in alpha-archy, there is a specific predetermined way that a couple or a household is meant to look. So, no matter what secondary gender you, dear viewer, identify as, I ask you to place yourself in this average beta nightmare scenario. You're in the middle of your life. Things are hectic. Everybody is on leave, and so not only do you have a pile of documents on your desk that reaches the ceiling and then back down again, other people's cycles have triggered your covert brood. And so the only thing on your mind is alphabetizing these goddamn spreadsheets to fight off your growing sense of anxious dread with a bat. Everyone thinks you're just being dramatic, but hey, you get a call. It's your alpha or omega sibling. They tell you something has happened and you need to do mandated babysitting time. Maybe for something important, maybe not. It doesn't matter. You're already panicking. Maybe everyone is already dead. You need to leave right now or your heart will explode. So explain this to your boss. You have to find some way to drop everything and make the possibly perilous journey, losing your mind the whole time. Even if you didn't want to go, socially and mentally, you have no choice. When you arrive, everyone is fighting and it's actually really bad.
And it's loud, like the neighbors are gonna hear. And they saw you come in, so if you can't fix this, everyone will know you're bad at your purpose. The kids are right there and upset. Everyone's upset. You want to soothe, and how have you been taught to do that? You act as enforcer for your alpha siblings and an advocate for your omega siblings to get things to an acceptable status quo. You demand that someone falls in line or begs for someone's safety. That's all you can do. And mind you, an omegaverse marriage is usually biologically at least almost forever. Someone in a bad relationship can't really leave, and if you played the matchmaker, that's your fault. Your own life doesn't matter narratively. Your role is to help shape other people's lives, and if they go wrong, you are culpable. And since you can't get them out of there by any acceptable means, you are now expected to make this shit show look nice. And so I ask you, are the betas the gaslighter gender? The ones who roll up and convince you to listen to your husband and have another kid that you don't actually want gender? The evil corporate lawyer gender? Or the doomed fussy humanitarian lawyer who can never save their clients? The person who wants to help you but cannot? And how long are you supposed to stay when you visit your sibling? That's probably not up to you. How thin are you spread? If you're a modern corporate beta, is your lack of fun leave justified by you getting family time off once a year to once again do work for an alpha omega couple so they get time off? Probably. And even if you don't have siblings, or the guy you're writing on AO3 doesn't, which again checks out with historically lower birth rates, that don't matter. You are still left with the social echoes and the hardwiring of facilitation. Your hindbrain makes you automatically throw your life away, making sure other people's lives go as they should. And it kicks and screams at you if you don't. Being a beta connotes a certain expected priority for collectivism that may not be returned back to you. And it may not even be for anything good. It could be ruining your life in the name of ruining people's lives, because that's the way the world works. In the most rigid of alphaarchy, betas are seen to exist to further the goals of alphas. That sucks! All this with the hope, but not the guarantee of what? Being appreciated, not dead. Who would want to be that guy? Nobody. Why would anyone buy into that? That's not a false promise of happiness that gets you to throw your life away chasing a gender role.
But hey now, let's not be too hasty.
I see that you feel upset and like you have no power here, but I'd like to remind you that beta comes second in the Greek alphabet. You are very valued. Hey, certain religious traditions probably say that God made alpha first and then a beta for bestie companionship. Now, I'm sorry that you feel exploited at work, but you realize that's just because you're working too hard, right? I mean, hey, if you get in one of your moods and you want to help, great, but alphaarchy will tell you that a thriving beta doesn't need to earn much money. Alpha should be the providers, right? They're providers on steroids. They have taken the burden for the rest of us. That's why they're paid more. You, the beta, are their good buddy. If you perform well enough as a second for your family or pack alphas, they'll take care of some bills. You don't have to work as hard as them. Are you a good secretary? Okay, you get a good bonus and a good vacation. You get to be a little spoiled, and so your income is supplementary. If you're being taken care of, your work is just for your own enrichment to soothe the frenetic nature we all know you have. You're naturally a workaholic. That's your choice. But your income is for being the fun uncle who rolls up with gifts, or the cool guy who buys everyone another round. You get treats for all your omega friends. So, yeah, if you're trying to live completely alone with no pack to be beholden to and get out of your social duty as a beta, which of course you are allowed to do, you might just struggle to get by. So why would you want to? You get some of the cherishment and care of being an omega. But you know what else? Betas have the burden of facilitation, but no, facilitation is not exactly care. No, care, the true day in, day out labor of care, still falls to omegas. Betas assist. They help you with your kids. They may love those kids and be deeply impactful in their nieces and nephews' lives and get joy and fulfillment out of that, but those aren't considered to be their kids. They are expected to put their needs aside for a bit to make sure all goes well, of course, but then they are expected to leave, to check in with other packs, to go do their jobs. Alphas and omegas may spread out once, but then they settle way earlier. Not a beta. They are allowed and expected to travel, and they should have the finances too. Omegas may have the promise of being the most cherished, but of course, that comes along with being capped. They belong to a specific someone. Betas, for at least a chunk of their life, can belong anywhere. They go off screen all the time, so they're worldly. They go abroad, questing across the country to go save your family. A journey like that, historically, could be dangerous. Isn't that kind of dashing? Chivalrous, almost knightly. You get some of the freedom and awe of being an alpha. And what do you have that neither of them get? What do you have to be in order to have good, soothe the pack instincts? You need to be goddamn charming, good with people, good at presenting yourself as reasonable. Because, hey, you may not get final say, you're just a little guy, but why would you want the responsibility and danger of being king? You sure are a good advisor. You're listened to. If YN calls you, you give good advice. You make people feel good about themselves and do the labor that no one wants to do. You're not threatening to an omega, but you're chivalrous. You're not demanding of an alpha, and you lighten their mood. You as a beta are not just needed. You are wanted. Not the worst of both worlds, the best of both worlds. A thriving beta is not a fussy little nobody. They are the flashy bisexual bird. In this case, possibly asexual. We'll get there when we get there. We have options. So a well-behaved beta is both the confirmed bachelor and the sellout girl boss. They are the glitzy, noble gentleman. They are the glamorous, rich, childless aunt who rolls up with presents, fixes everything, and then leaves a week later with so much appreciation to go be on a Zoom call on a beach somewhere. The cool best friend in a Disney show wearing too many belts. You're cool, and maybe you're not allowed much of an interior other than that, but hey, what an exterior. So yes, they have institutionalized biological side character syndrome. They are socially groomed and evolutionarily hardwired to be the fanfic bestie character who is just there to help YN get some. But being a good beta is embodying a beloved side character. The reward for performing well is being the fandom's favorite little one-dimensional guy. You know those characters in fandoms, typically women, that everyone claims to just love, but the only characterization that they give them is they have the brain cell and sigh over the main couple being stupid? Congrats, good betas, that's you, if you're being good. As for bad betas, well, we'll get to that later. We have conquered a little of the beta mystery. I'm glad to see we did something like anything here today, but that was all literally just the bare bones basics. We are still lacking some very important elements of social dimension. Baby, we haven't even touched smells. Now that we know about reproduction, what does marriage look like? What can that tell us about betas? Who are they allowed to get with? What about the teeth? What about the scent glands? What about the sitcom tropes and the smell-o-vision people? That will all be covered in the final section of Betaology 1-on-1 sometime in, She bay on my ta till my omega verse. She O on my mega till my alpha. Okay, that's fair. She O on my mega till my beta averse. Okay. She not on my...